Hello everyone, welcome to episode 12 of our project No Secrets R33 GTR. Now, in our last episode, you saw that we strengthened and modified our rear subframe, and that is all ready to go. Now, our plan is to assemble everything onto that rear subframe outside of the car so you guys can check it all out. But like most big bare shell rebuilds, sometimes you just can't get the parts fast enough to be able to do that. And there's some other things that we need to do under the back of the car before we can put the rear subframe back in anyway. So let's take a look at some of the parts, some of the things that have been happening since last week's episode. Now, first up, we've had a bunch of parts sent off to get blasted, as well as that subframe. One of them is our rear uprights, or knuckles, whatever you want to call them. So they've had all the bushes pressed out and have been blasted, so they look pretty good. Now, we're going to be sending these off to get powder coated first before they get assembled, before we then get some new bushes to put into where all the arms join up, and a new suspension bushing, which is the bushing for the coilover. Now, to go onto those knuckles, we need some new hubs. Now, we spoke to the guys from Kudos Motorsport about what the best option is, and they said, don't worry about going OEM, they are rip-off, get these GSP rear hub assemblies. So the bearing is already pressed in, so it just bolts straight on. The other thing we needed to go with it was just some of those rear seals that go in here, inside the knuckle before we put the hub on. So the knuckles will be like brand new, the seals are new, and the hubs are going to be new on our rear end as well. We are still currently waiting on our rear diff to arrive from the guys from JDM Garage, and we're also going to get that rebuilt and strengthened, and also get the rear diff cover powder coated as well. So there's a few things we're waiting on before we can do that. But we did get all of our bolts and nuts and washers and everything we took out of the rear of the car sent back from all getting zinc coated. So I know Cardo, he loves all this zinc coated stuff. It seems to be the big thing for restoring these, but I've only really done it on all that rear suspension stuff because it's the most hard wearing and durable coating those guys said they could do, and most of that's hidden away. Now, because our car came as a bare shell, we didn't have any shafts for it. Luckily, I already had some rear shafts spare for a GTR, managed to get hold of some front shafts in pretty ratty condition, and the tail shaft that was hanging out the bottom of this thing didn't look very good as well. So we took all of them to Central Drive Shaft Services in 5 Dock. They've done all of our CVs and drive shafts, etc., and got all of them freshened up like new. So the CVs inside have been serviced. They've all got new boots on them as well, all been re-greased, new nuts, everything, the whole lot. So they look pretty much as good as new. So we got all of those drive shafts done and the tail shaft. So fair bit of money to get the tail shaft done to be like new, but realistically, you just can't trust some old tail shaft hanging under the car. You don't know what it's been through. So we got all of that done, ready to go into the car. Just a few bits and bobs, sway bar mounts and the rear brace that goes under the car. They've all been blasted so that they can get powder coated after this. A couple of the little things, as you know, it had R34 GTR front lower arms. Luckily, under my old house in storage was some R32 GTR lower control arms that are the same. We're going to get these pulled apart, get new ball joints put in at each end, get them powder coated, they'll be like new. Some of you are going to cringe at this. I really wanted Ganador mirrors for this car, but the cheapest set I could find, even when you can find them, was $1,500. I managed to find some of these, basically a similar aero style to a Ganador mirror. They're nothing special, but with a little bit of work, they should look pretty good. The internet's going to slam me and say, why didn't you put Ganadors on? But I'm sorry, I can't spend $1,500 on a set of second-hand mirrors. It's either these or stock, one or the other. But the next thing I want to show you, oh yeah, I'm pretty excited about this one. Now, one thing that did arrive for our R33 GTR that I've been super excited about, pumped, is R35 GTR brakes all round. Now, why do people use these? Well, for a few reasons. That whole OEM, they come off a later model GTR, is kind of cool for that purity on earlier model GTRs. Secondly, well, they're Brembo, great brand, good quality, you know they work. And thirdly, they are freaking massive. Early model R35 GTRs have 380mm rotors front and rear, 6 piston front, 4 piston rear. The 4 piston rear is as big or bigger than the brakes I have on my Time Attack S14 and on my R32 GTR. So they're a monstrous brake kit. A lot of people get them because they just look cool too, but I've got them because I want a set of brakes on our 33 that we literally can't make fade or overpower with that car for doing circuit work, and this is probably the best choice. There's some other things I could have gone for, your APs, your Alcons, etc., but I don't know, I just really wanted R35 brakes on a car that I've owned. You pay the price though. Just calipers in pretty average condition that a wreck has handled a little bit. You're talking $4,500 on eBay from America that I got these for with no rotors. They came with pads, but I'm not really worried about that. I'm going to use E-League pads for this car. We had great success with our WRX with those. We're going to be teaming up with DBA to get rotors for this. And a friend of ours, Marianne, and his R35 GTR brake adapter kit that doesn't require any cutting on the knuckles or any machining and things like that. So all up, look to be spending anywhere from sort of, I don't know, if you play it smart, maybe $7,000, but all up to $10,000 to get a set of these on your car. The other thing we're going to do is refurbish them as well. So we're about to strip these down in a minute, which is a good chance for me to check these out firsthand because I've never pulled any R35 brakes apart before. It's a first for me. We're going to send them off. We'll get new seals, etc. done after the guys at Produce Factory get these completely freshened up, powder coated and look brand spanking new. So as you can tell with this car, we're pretty much going all in on everything we can. So trying to make everything like new or brand new and everything the best of the best that you can get. So let's strip these down, take a bit of a look, see what makes them tick. We'll send them off to get disassembled by Parramatta Brake and Clutch because they're going to do the seals again later. And then we'll get to work underneath the R33. Let's go. All right, we'll get the brake pads out first. So the pins need to come out first by the look of it. Oh, there's one pad out. Other one's just a bit buckled over. There's the other pin. But check that out. Look at the size of a front brake pad on an R35. That is just massive. So it's one thing to have a big rotor, but if you've got a big rotor on the same size pad, it's not going to do as much as just something like that. It is a monstrous pad. Jesus. Those two bolts, pins and bracket, I will send all of those off to get cleaned professionally and tidied up to look like new. Produce Factory should be able to do that. There's two bleeders here. It's a monoblock caliper, which is pretty cool. Monoblock basically means this is just one piece. All the GTR other style of brakes from earlier models all have a split through here, and the caliper is two-piece, so you have to seal all that up. But this is monoblock. What's the advantage? Stronger and sometimes lighter because it needs less reinforcement. So now have a look at the pistons in here. They've got a lot of little ports on them that look like to be some type of gas port or cooling port, which basically helps the gas created during braking escape from in the piston, and obviously that help dissipate heat a little bit as well. So they're stopping that build-up of brake gas, I guess, is a way to make them work a little bit better. The seals in this appear to be in pretty good condition, but I'm still going to get them replaced anyway. I want to get all this sort of professionally cleaned up because there's, yeah, it's a bit of a mess. I don't have to clean them, but I'm going to get pretty dirty now. So I'll keep pulling these apart, bag it all up, and then basically get ready to set this disassembled by the guys at Parramatta Brake and Clutch. I'll let them do all the seals and everything. Then we'll send them over to Produce Factory, and we'll keep going from there. Let's do it. So the rear pads on the R35 brakes are probably as big as R32 GTR, R33, R34, etc. Brembo front pads. Check it out. So the back is big as or bigger than the front on old GTRs with a much bigger rotor. So anyway, now you know why they work so well. So that's the pads out of the R35 calipers and a bit of a look at what makes them tick. Monoblock, massive pads. You can see why these things are such a great upgrade. Now, before you balk at the price of putting these into your car, just remember that a very good AP Racing or Alcon kit or a Brembo GT racing kit that's this sort of caliber and size is going to set you back $15,000, $20,000 for something good. So when you hear that it's sort of, you know, 7 to 10 grand to get R35 brakes in your car, depending on condition, etc., really compared to some of the big stuff, it's actually relatively cheap. Although being a GTR, nothing's cheap. So let's box these up, we'll send them off to get the pistons pulled out, and then in another video we're going to show you how these get refurbished by the guys at Produced Factory. Now the next thing we're going to do is modify the brake rotor backing plate. This is designed to obviously keep out things like rocks and debris and things like that on road cars. Race cars don't use them because you want maximum cooling. Now when you put an R35 GTR rotor in, or any larger brake kit for that matter, if you want to keep the factory backing plate, you need to trim this edge around the backing plate to fit the larger rotor on. Or the other option is you can drill out the spot welds and remove that backing plate, but keep this center part, which is part of the assembly for the handbrake, if you want to keep the factory drum style handbrake. That's what we're going to do because, well, race car. Voila! So there you have it. We've removed essentially the guard for the rotor off the backing plate section. We keep these bits, which are used for the drum handbrake setup. We'll just tidy these up a little bit from where all the spot welds have been drilled out, and then we'll send these off to get powder coated along with some other bits. Now the next thing I need to tackle on the car while I'm waiting for all the bits that I need to do to reassemble the rear subframe and everything that goes with it is pull the fuel tank out, work out what's missing from it, give it a clean, work out what we're going to do with our fuel system, and most importantly, I need to tidy up underneath the car. One option was to go and get it blasted, but we've still got an engine in there waiting for dummy assembly, we've got fab work to do, etc., and I can't move the car until it has its rear subframe back in, so I'm forced to get out the wire wheel like I did on our R32 GTR and tidy up underneath, give it some new underbody sealant, repair any rust, repair any damage underneath, and then put some black over it so it looks nice and factory fresh. And to be honest, we're going to race the car around a circuit. It's going to be driven on the street. I'd rather just go black underneath. So essentially, everything in the back half of the car, I've pretty much got to pull out and start essentially refurbishing it ready for when the subframe's ready to go back in. So the fuel tank is out of our R33 GTR. I needed to remove it for a couple of reasons. It didn't have a hat on it, so I didn't know what debris or whatever else had fallen in there. It's going to need a clean. What's the best way to clean it out? Well, with petrol. It's a plastic fuel tank designed to handle petrol. So what I do is I clean it out with petrol. Then you don't have to worry about any contaminants left over that aren't suitable to be in there. Some people use water and other things like that, but I like to clean it out with petrol. Being a plastic tank means I don't have to worry about any rust inside except debris that may have fallen off any of the fuel pump components that are inside the tank. Now, while this thing's out, let's have a talk about the pros and cons of using a factory fuel tank. Now, R32 GTR, S13, a lot of other cars have their fuel tank under the spare tyre wheel, which means all of this weight sits behind the back tyres. Now for handling purposes, that's a big moment of inertia right at the back there that can help make the car pretty tail happy. And as the weight, based on how much fuel there is, changes, you can find the dynamics of the car changes, and it's a lot more noticeable in a car like that. Now if you put a small fuel cell in the boot, it's not as bad when you're trying to get your weight balance correct like we've done in our S14. But when you want to have 60, 70 litres of fuel, Nissan actually put it pretty much in the best place, and that's under the back seat. The only problem with these is to get it out, you have to take the whole subframe out. So they're a bit of a pain in the ass to get out when you need to fix them or do anything to them, but they do sit in the perfect place. Now looking at the design, you can see that there's a hump here in the middle that essentially separates it into two sections down the bottom there. So how did they get fuel from this side of the tank to this side so you always got access to that fuel? Well, it's pretty simple really. Inside the hat, you can see here, there's actually 3 inlets and outlets when there's normally only 2. Normally you just have fuel out to the engine bay and fuel back. That's it. There's no overflow or anything, it's just a fuel tank. This has a third fitting on there. Now this third fitting, if you look on the inside, as the fuel that returns from the engine bay under pressure, well, under flow anyway, it's being forced, comes out, it goes through this venturi which causes suction and sucks fuel out of the other side of the tank. But obviously if the fuel level is higher than the hump, it'll just flow back into that side. But if the fuel level is lower than the hump, it'll just keep drawing fuel from that side into this side. Will it get all of it? Probably not, but it doesn't really need to. The other things you can see in here are all to do with fuel vapor. This is like an overflow here for when you're filling up your fuel, if it has to overflow and go somewhere else. You've got a little one-way valve here where you fill up. You've got all these extra lines here which flow around all over the car. They're essentially all to do with vapor and controlling emissions. Do we need to worry about that? Not really for a race car. Looking inside this, it still has the fuel level meter, which looks like this, but basically is inside this tube. That bit's inside, we'll probably pull that out and clean it. All the wiring's actually still in here as well. It's not a bad thing. The wiring down to the fuel level sender on this other side is still there. The plug is still there for measuring the fuel level, so we'll probably pull that out and check it. They've obviously had some aftermarket hat on it because they've gone and put this on there, but we'll remove all that and decide if we're going to use a factory hat or an aftermarket hat. I'm not sure yet. Now, some people go and put twin in-tank pumps in these, which provides plenty of fuel flow. But when you're doing circuit work and you're going around corners and you're getting fuel slosh and things like that, you just can't go past an external surge tank. And me personally, I'm big on the whole surge tank thing. I don't care about how good a twin pump setup can be for making power, that's fine. I just don't like having fuel slosh and I don't want that to be an issue. So we will just be using an upgraded in-tank pump, just so it's new more than anything else, just a Walbro pump, Deutschwerks, I don't know. We'll get a new pump for this that's E85 compatible, and that pump will only need to go and fill up a surge tank, so it doesn't need to have huge amounts of volume or power, not a lot of current draw, which is good. So we're going to clean it out, new fuel pump, check all the lines, get this thing cleaned up and get it ready to go back in the car once we've sorted out underneath, which is, looking at it, quite a lot of work that's going to be for another video. See you next time.